Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits as we get closer to the beginning of a new month and we could start to see the ending of two sports, ready to move on to the next round and crown a champion. Does this mean we're getting closer to another sports dead zone? Well, it's starting to look that way, but have no fear, as I'll cover all that's taking place as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with host JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And with June just days away, and with the chill in the Northeast, could spring arrive? And I understand it's been here in and out of the clouds over the last couple of months, but with June literally 3 days away, you would think that we'd have 75, 77 degree weather, but it is 62, cloudy and overcast. But enough of the weather report here in the tri-state Northeast area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Unfortunately, I have to start off the podcast on a not so good note. And no, thankfully, everybody's fine. Everybody's safe, sound. And I can report that my family, friends, etc., everybody is good. And the same for the sports world as far as people that are alive and breathing are concerned. But when it comes to the NBA and NHL, and I don't care if Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, or Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, were standing in front of me, because as of right this very moment, and this is twofold for both of these commissioners in their sports, they would have to say that this conference final has been a flat-out disaster. And I understand you've had some competitive games, and you still have a series that has been uber competitive, that being the Knicks and Pacers, and of course I'm going to get to that in a minute. But as far as the big picture, and we could go through the whole playoffs, you could actually argue that the first round in both the NBA and NHL has been way better than the second round and even this conference final round. And yes, I understand that Denver and OKC went the distance, 7 games, and that was a series that pretty much surprised everybody, because I'm going to get on OKC and even Denver and the opponent that OKC faced in this conference final. But with all that being said, this has turned out to be, I'm sure, their worst nightmare, because you already have a situation in the NHL where the Panthers advanced, big whoop, no surprise, and obviously the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that's where I'm going to begin. Because for starters, and this is the first part of it, the Thunder, as they did on Monday night in a big-time effort, and we talked about this on the podcast then, where I want to see OKC's toughness, I want to see their mettle, I want to see them give us that stamp of approval of a team that means business. And I understand that in the previous round against Denver, they did so down 2-1, as I've chronicled a zillion times here over the last, whatever it is, 2 weeks. And then on top of that, for them to play in a back-and-forth Game 5 and were able to gut that one out at home. All right, they did lose in Denver, tough game, but then in Game 7, they blew the doors off of the Nuggets and put the Nuggets out to pasture as far as the 2025 NBA playoffs are concerned. So now you get to this point where the Thunder, who on Monday night, up 2-1, and I wanted to see a statement. I wanted to see them go in there and win a game. They didn't have to blow them out. They didn't have to win convincingly. As it was, they needed every point, because they did win by a basket, 128-126, but it was headlined by their MVP and one SGA, who had 40, 10, and 9 in the game. And when you also have Jalen Williams chip in 34, Chet Holmgren with 23, and it was a collective effort, but led by their stars, and in particular, the MVP, as I mentioned, the T-Wolves showed the world that this is a team that not only means business, but I believe they're championship ready. And then you have last night, which was just I don't even know what to call it. Was it a destruction? Was it just a dismantling? Was it an evisceration? All those you could certainly fill into that sentence, because what they did last night was the coronation of a baker's dozen. 13 years of not getting to an NBA final. And it culminated in OKC last night in a 124-94 drubbing of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm going to get to them in a second. But it's interesting when you look at the trajectory of the Thunder and how they've been able to, from the start of the season, 68 wins. Yes, they were back and forth with the Cavaliers for the best record in the sport. And then obviously when the Cavs went through that stretch there in the middle of March into early April where they started to fall off a little bit, and then OKC still had pedal to the metal and put themselves in a stratosphere amongst the great teams in NBA regular season history. And that's right. People can say, what? This Thunder team? When you win 68 games, 68-14. And think about this. The 72-73 Celtics, who didn't even make it to a final, led by John Havlicek, led by Dave Cowens. We would go through all the Celtic greats of that time. They lost a Game 7 in their building, the first time they lost a Game 7 in a playoff series in Celtic history, to a Knicks team that went on to win that final. But guess what? Nobody remembers that team other than, of course, yours truly, who's a nutjob Celtic fan. But what was the record of the Celtics that year? 68-14. So when you're up against the annals of the greats and teams that certainly are at the pantheon of a regular season, which has to be put a lid on their season with a championship. And what we saw there last night was a team that is on a mission, is a team that is going to be a big favorite. Maybe a solid favorite against the Pacers if they win the night. And if the Knicks certainly come from behind and miraculously win that series, they are going to be, Oklahoma City that is, they are going to be a heavy favorite. And yes, the Knicks fan could be, whoa, what do you mean a heavy favorite? Oh, hey, if the Knicks get there, they have just as good as a shot. No, they won't. All right, let's just call it as we see it because of their depth, because they're going to be tired. And to think they're going to have to play 3 Game 7s in essence in order for them to beat the Pacers. And we'll talk Knicks Pacers in a second. But back to OKC. But having the regular season that they had, they blitzed through Memphis in the opening round, no big whoop, and then Denver. Now you have to say, as you hear a fire engine in the background, that's what happens when you live in the big city. When you look at what Denver had done to OKC, giving them a run for their money. And usually it's not the case that you have a cakewalk to an NBA final unless you're the 2024 Celtics of last year. But the Nuggets gave them all they could handle, and granted in that final game, they sent them back to the Rocky Mountains pretty much after the first half. And for the Thunder to then face the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that a lot of people thought may not would have come out as the victor in the series, but certainly we were thinking this has to be at least 6 games. Could it possibly go 7? And what we saw from the Timberwolves was anything but that, and more on them in a second. But all the bouquets need to be thrown at OKC. We can talk about Sam Presti. We can talk about the GM. We can talk about Mark Daniel, the head coach, and obviously the team that is comprised there in Oklahoma City, and they have more resources coming with all the draft picks. And this is a team, people, that is going to be here to stay for quite some time. And I understand we have second aprons, and I understand this isn't the 1980s where you're going to have this team be in the same roster, especially when it comes to their core players for the next 5 to 10 years. But I'm sure Sam Presti will make some moves, not necessarily trades of the current roster, but moves enough to keep this nucleus intact, to know that this is a window that is continuing to rise open, and who knows how many more finals appearances or even finals victories are in their future. So OKC, they got it set. And with all that being said, and here's the second part of this, they're winning the final. I understand we got to watch it. We just can't give them the trophy just yet. But I would be absolutely shocked if the Thunder do not win the NBA championship this year. Based on everything that I talked about, they have the MVP. They have a roster that is built for the postseason. They have size. They have length. They have defense. They do need a second option because Jalen Williams is a little bit inconsistent for my liking. It'd be great if SGA had that second banana, that pure shooter that you know is going to be able to knock down key jumpers or go through a stretch of a game where they're going to go to him and focus on him as opposed to everybody focusing on SGA and then hoping that Jalen Williams gets hot or Lou Dort gets hot or Chet Holmgren gets hot. And that's not to knock any of the other guys on the team. But there is a situation when you look at a lot of the other teams in the sport, you're always going to have that second banana. Whether it's a 1-1A, let's say LeBron, Luka, just to use them as an example, or KD, Devin Booker. I'm talking about having that second fiddle, that Robin, where here on the Thunder, is Jalen Williams really the Robin? He's more of a 2 than he is of a 1A next to SGA. So with all that being said, to me, this is their championship to lose. I'd be shocked. It's just a matter of who they're going to play and how long these series are going to be. And obviously, I'm not going to prognosticate whether it's going to be Indiana if they win the night or the Knicks. Although I did say that it would be the Thunder having a solid favorite going into the finals if they do play the Pacers. And if it happened to be the Knicks, they'd be a heavy favorite. But I won't make any predictions, obviously, come Monday on the podcast, because going back to my original thought, with the disaster that has been this conference semis, if the Pacers put away the Knicks tonight, guess what? The NBA Finals do not start until a week from tonight. So you're going to have 7 days off, and there's no adjustment. It's not as if they're going to start the finals on Tuesday or Sunday night if the Pacers win. It is etched in stone that the finals will begin 7 days. You're going to have to wait in order for a game 1 in Oklahoma City, whether it's the Pacers or Knicks, to represent in the Eastern Conference. And to me, I understand that's the breaks. That's just how it goes. But it's just a shame, because I'm sure Adam Silver was hoping that Pacers-Knicks, as everybody thought it was going to be a 7-game series, and right now it's looking anything but. So I'll segue to Knicks-Pacers. You had the game there Tuesday night, and the Pacers, they pretty much played from in front the whole night. I understand the Knicks try to make it interesting. Late in the game, they cut it to 6 on a couple of occasions, but they weren't able to get that key stop or key basket, and obviously had nobody to slow down Tyrese Halliburton, who had a game for the ages, 32, 12, and 15, 12 rebounds, 15 assists, but the biggest number of all, no turnovers, which we have not seen in the like as far as a playoff performer is concerned. And Halliburton, I know he's been a lightning rod here throughout this whole postseason, leading into the story of being overrated amongst his peers, to his dad going on the court with Giannis in that same game where Tyrese Halliburton drove past Giannis to get the game-winning basket when they were down by 7 with 40 seconds to go. We know what happened in Game 2 against Cleveland, down by 8, hitting the big 3. We know what happened in Game 1 here in the Knicks series. They came all the way back from a 17, 14, and 9-point deficit with 58 seconds to go, and then hitting the game-tying shot, which he thought was game-winning, choke sign and all, but they were able to prevail. And then he culminates this series to this point with that masterpiece, that tour de force of a game, and now the Knicks are at the end of the plank, getting ready to get tipped off there by a Pacer team that I'm sure, knowing what they saw last night with the Thunder winning, I would think that they're going to mean all business to put the rest of this series, and even more so, maybe even win it on the Madison Square Garden floor to rub it even more to the fan base, to the team, organization, etc., that the Pacers will move on to an NBA final. Do I think it's going to happen? I talked about this yesterday on my live stream on YouTube, 12 noon Eastern every Wednesday, where if I had to rank the teams that were down 3-1. Now, mind you, I'm not going to talk about the games last night where obviously we know what OKC and then the Hurricanes lost to the Panthers, but I thought the best shot for a team that was down 3-1 to get to a Game 7, not win the series, but just to a Game 7, I had the Dallas Stars 1, which they do play tonight, and the Knicks number 2 if I ranked them. Now, the Knicks, we know grit, toughness, etc., but they're running on fumes. And I know I got people asking me about Coach Tom Thibodeau, whether or not he comes back. People, he's going to come back next year. The Knicks took an extra step. Now, mind you, they beat the Celtics. I understand without Tatum those last couple of games, but they did have the 2-0 series lead, and not to rehash the nightmare that I experienced there in those first 2 games of the conference semis. But the team, and in particular the coach, they got past the conference semifinals, which they did so last year against the Pacers, and got themselves to a conference final. So you could only think that the next stop for this Knicks team, if they don't get out of this series alive, is an NBA final next year. So why would they think about jettisoning the head coach now, considering that they've made their steps? And I'd be shocked if that's going to be the case, even if they get blown out by 50 tonight. But for the Knicks, I could see them winning this game tonight. It would almost be similar to when the Celtics, after losing Tatum in Game 4 in the previous series, how they had the Knicks in Game 5 and they had the Luke Cornett game, and Jaylen Brown certainly was the distributor, and they went going away, winning by 25, and that was one for the fans to say, we showed our pride, we were able to at least get one more win out of this series despite the devastating news with Tatum, and then we know what happened there that Friday where they got sent packing for the spring and summer. And the Knicks, I think, face the same situation. Now, mind you, it's not as if they are not going to have their best player, because Jalen Brunson obviously will be suited up in the lineup, but I can see the Knicks putting it all out on the floor, somehow, some way winning a Game 5, and then come Saturday night losing in a Game 6 there at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, or whatever the name of that arena is. But could I see the Pacers winning tonight? Absolutely. Do I think they will? There's a part of me, because of how they performed here in this postseason, and they're on a magic carpet ride, and destiny awaits for them too. And even if they do match up against OKC, and if that's the case, I'll have plenty of time to unpack that. But it's not as if this team has done it with smoke and mirrors. They have had a playoff run to remember. And even if they don't win a final, which I know you need to punctuate it with that, the fans and the citizens of Indianapolis, they are going to be over the moon with this team because of all the magic moments, in particular, Halliburton had given them throughout the course of these first 3 rounds. But with that being said, I could see the Knicks one more time pulling out one of those games where it's going to be tooth and nail, nip and tuck, as you know, and maybe they'll pull away late, win a game, and go on to Game 6. Although I'm not 100% confident in that, because I think the Pacers want to seal the deal tonight, not have to worry about having to play a Game 6 in their building to even give any sign of life to a Knicks team that you know they're going to go in there with no pressure. They're going to just try to play balls to the wall and try to bring this series back to Madison Square Garden on Monday. But I think the Pacers will win in 6, no more than 6. And would I be shocked if it goes 7? I have to say I wouldn't be. Because as great as the Pacers have played here in this spring, they can have 1 or 2 lapses, as you saw there in Game 3, when they didn't play well in the second half offensively. In the series against Cleveland, when they were up 2-0, they played terribly in that Game 3. And mind you, it was the middle of the series. It wasn't late. But it's not as if Indiana's unbeatable. So if you're a Knicks fan, I think tonight you got to get into that building, pumped up, ready to go. Try to have a big lead. Make sure you hold on to it. Don't pull any Game 1 shenanigans as you did in this series. But something tells me that the Knicks will make it to Saturday, and that's where the season will end. And if the Pacers do win tonight, I would not be shocked in the least. I wouldn't. So like I said, that Knicks pick is based on everything that this Knicks team is comprised of. And I understand that grit and determination and guts and guile is not going to guarantee you a win. But I would think that for one last hurrah, especially on their home floor, they can't go out losing 3 games to the Pacers in their building. They're due to win a home game at some point. So I think tonight will be it, and then come Saturday, that is the end. Now, one thing I didn't really touch on, which I want to get to because I wanted to talk about tonight and more so on OKC than Minnesota, and I understand I probably should have packaged it all with the Western Conference Final. But for the Timberwolves, and I understand they're under a lot of fire here over the last few days, in particular Anthony Edwards. And with Edwards there on Monday night where he shot 5 for 13, 16 points, not a good job. And I understand that OKC did a masterful job on trying to contain him, double teaming him, making sure the ball's out of his hands. And it's not as if Edwards has had a monster series to date, but for him to have that type of performance and then in the postgame to come out and say that, hey, I played the right way, that I didn't do anything, and I'm paraphrasing this part, where I didn't do anything to play a bad game. I was just trying to distribute to my teammates, get them open looks, etc. And the only thing I can say to that is you are one of the top stars in the sport, and I understand you've been suffocated. But great players do find a way to get open looks and open shots. And we understand that Edwards is a guy that can attack the basket, break his man off the dribble. I get it, if you're double teamed, very difficult to do so. But you still find a way to get yourself to a point where, and they only lost by 2 points there in game 4, where he has more of an opportunity to get the ball in the basket and do his best to put his team in a position to win. As it was, they were down by 2 and had a desperation moment there at the final seconds of the game. But still, Edwards, I was very shocked by that response. And then last night, he shot more of the basketball. He took 6 more shots than he did in game number 4. 7 for 19, 1 for 7 from 3. Certainly a performance to forget. And then in the postgame, what does he say? I guess, I don't know what the question was, pretty much asking, oh, how does it feel? Does it hurt? Blah, blah, blah. And his response was, no, it doesn't hurt. I'm 23 years old. I'm going to have many cracks at this thing. And it's an honest answer. So that I will give Anthony Edwards. And because he's 23, I just don't want to chalk it up to him being young and obviously clueless, etc. But the other thing that he also said on top of that is that nobody's going to work harder than me this offseason. All right, fantastic. But you can't say that you're going to have many cracks at this thing, because when you're there, you have to seize the moment. You just can't all of a sudden automatically think that because you're young and because your team, which obviously there's going to be some moving parts come next year, and you're not going to see the same roster this year that you saw, or next year that you saw this year. So for Edwards to come out with a little bit of hubris on that part, that's where the basketball gods will certainly find him and strike him down at some point, because there are no guarantees, despite them making it to back-to-back conference finals for the first time in franchise history, that they're going to get back to this point again next year. And if there was any indication of a team that grew up and shown some growth, was the team that he just faced, where Oklahoma City last year was a 1 seed and they lost in the second round, as you know, as I've said a million times over. And then now, after getting past Denver, they disposed of the T-Wolves in the fashion that they did, and now they're standing proudly as Western Conference champs, looking to see who's going to come out of the East, and they're going to be the favorites to win the whole thing. So Edwards can come out and say that, and it's a little bit of, you know, him puffing his chest out, because it is not easy to get back to these points. And I get it. You're 23. Hey, I've been to conference finals 2 years in a row. I can make it there next year and the year after that. Injuries play a part of it. Changing of the roster. There's a lot of things that play into this. Not to say that it's all based on luck, but you got to have the chips fall where they may. And I get it. One more time. Last time. He's young. And you would think he's going to learn from this to the point where he says, nobody's going to work harder than me. And God bless him. Because all the talk of the Stephen A's of the world, oh, he's Jordan-esque and all that, nonsense. Put that sucker to rest. Because this series, he wasn't even an original Air Jordan left sneaker, let alone MJ himself, as far as him having that same type of DNA that his airness has. And I've actually gone back and forth with people on my YouTube channel, among other social media accounts, where people would say to me, oh, MJ was overrated. Who did he play back in his day? Anthony Edwards had to go up against these guys, Nikola Jokic, SGA, blah, blah, blah. Who did MJ go up against? And I'm thinking to myself, what? And then people want to bring up Kobe and then argue me with that and say that Kobe was the GOAT even more so than Jordan. I'm like, well, where do you think Kobe patterned his game after? So people are just clueless. They're probably 25-year-olds that never even watched a second of Michael Jordan play. So I'm just going to take that with a grain of salt and just say, move along, little boy, or little man, whatever you want to call it. So with that being said, Edwards certainly has some growing up to do, and hopefully he will learn from this to the point where he's going to have to take the next step, because conference finals isn't the end-all be-all. And just because you beat Luka and LeBron in the first round, and last year the KD, Devin Booker, as well as Nikola Jokic second round, and kudos to that second round because that was a big-time win, but he has fizzled out here in these 2 conference finals to the point where he is not even part of a shadow of Michael Jordan himself. So that's what I have with the NBA. And of course, just check the YouTube channel as I'll talk about Knicks Pacers. If it's thrilling, if it's to the wire, whatever, you'll get an instant reaction tonight. If not, I'll talk about it tomorrow. But again, if the Pacers win tonight, you're not going to hear a lot of NBA talk, maybe some previews here and there, and some storylines that I'll have on the podcast come Monday. But it is going to be in the wilderness for about a week if that's the case. So get ready for that, people. All right, now let me turn my attention to the ice, where the NHL, just like I mentioned at the very top, they have to be pretty discouraged, and I don't care what Gary Bettman says, because when he looked at these series on a whole, not that you're going to love Carolina and Florida, Edmonton, Dallas, all right, it's a rematch of the Western Conference Final last year, but I'm sure if you would have told him at the start of the conference finals, similar to Adam Silver, but if I say, Kamish, you may have an opportunity to where you're not even going to see a 7th game, but you're going to have Florida dust off Carolina in 5 after being up 3-0 in the series, and then for Edmonton to beat Dallas in 5 games and pretty much without a fight. You know what he would tell me? He'd probably say, you're off your rocker. Well, guess what? I would have been right. And as it is right now, let's talk about Florida and Carolina. Monday night, you had Carolina save face as they held on to a 1-0 lead. They got a couple of empty netters late. They didn't play 3 of their starters, as we talked about there on Monday. The Nico Mikolas of the world and the Sam Reinharts, as well as the AJ Greers of the world, did not play. And I don't even know if they played in the game last night. I was out and about throughout the course of the evening, so I was keeping tabs on what was going on, but I didn't watch start to finish or didn't watch any part of the game. But of course, following it and seeing what had transpired, and with the Hurricanes down 3-1 going home, they did have the luxury, similar to the Knicks, to where if they happen to win that home game and somehow, some way, they'd have to go on the road to win a Game 6 and steal that to come back home and have Game 7, as opposed to the other way around, where if they had to get to a Game 7, it would have to be a road win, home win, and then road. Here it's home, road, and home. But in this case with the Hurricanes, forget about it. Because although they got out of the gate flying, so after that win there Monday night, last night, Sebastian Aho with a couple of goals, 2-0, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, here we go, ready to take off. But the Hurricanes took a stupid penalty, which led to a power play goal by Matthew Tkachuk, and then 30 seconds later, Evan Rodriguez scores to tie the game. I believe it was about 7.5 minutes into the second period, and then just 30 seconds after that, that's when Evan Rodriguez scored, and that's when you thought at that point, whomever gets the next goal of this game is going to win this game. Because if Carolina would have got that next goal, you would have thought, mind you, it's 1 goal, anything can happen, I understand, but momentum would have been on the side of that team, knowing that if the Panthers dug out of that 2-0 hole and made it 3-2, or if the Panthers tied it and let's say Carolina got a late goal in the second period, who knows, maybe that will carry them into the third and maybe push them to a victory, and where they have to go back on a plane to Sunrise and maybe test their fate to maybe bring it back to the Carolinas for a Game 7. But as it was, who got the third goal of the game, or really the 5th goal when you think about it, but the 3rd goal for that team in the game? Yes, none other than the Florida Panthers. So even with the Panthers taking a 3-2 lead heading into the 3rd period, and although they did get the equalizer there by Seth Jarvis in the 3rd period, and you thought to yourself, uh-oh, now Carolina, if they could somehow get the next goal and put them to a point where they could position themselves to victory, that was not the case. Because what happened? Johnny on the spot, the guy who, you can't even argue it, is the clutch player, or one of the top clutch players that we've seen here in the last 10 years. How many times have I talked about Carter Verhaeghe getting big goal after big goal? I believe he has, 13 game-winning goals in his career in the postseason. Whether it's in overtime in Game 7s, whether it's just in regular overtime, regulation, it doesn't matter. This guy, for whatever the reason, has a platinum hockey stick. And what did he do? 4 minutes after Seth Jarvis ties the game, he gets the game-winning goal. They tack on an empty netter, and away we go. Hurricanes blow off into the Atlantic, and the Panthers head back south with another Eastern Conference trophy, which they did not touch, because if you recall 2 years ago when they swept the Hurricanes in 2023 and they got the Prince of Wales trophy, to where the team rallied around it, they touched it because it's been a long time since they had gone to a Stanley Cup Final. If you recall, they went in 96, and obviously that was do the math, 27 years? Is got that right? Yeah, 27 years. So yes, they rallied around the trophy, they were ecstatic, and then of course they got whacked by the Golden Knights in 5 games. Last year, they didn't go anywhere near the trophy. Same situation this year, as now the Panthers are going to head back to the Cup Final to go back-to-back. And who they await in that final, in all likelihood, it's going to be the Edmonton Oilers, because of what they did there on Tuesday night. I mean, what more can you say about this team? Now, they suffered a big blow. They lost Zach Hyman in the game on what looked like a very innocent hit by Mason Marchment, the defenseman of Dallas. And Hyman, who's had a big postseason to date, but he left the game holding his wrist, had surgery based on what the coach Chris Knobloch said. And from what he said, he's likely done for the season. So I don't know the extent of the injury or how long the surgery will keep him out, whether it's just a week or 2 week injury to where, let's say if it is 2 weeks, could he come back for the latter part of the Stanley Cup Final? But based on what the coach said, that is unlikely. So they do lose Zach Hyman, but they do get Matthias Ekholm, the defenseman, who has not played since April 11th. So at least he anchors the back line for the Oilers. So even though it's addition by subtraction, they do get another big player that they needed, guy for the power play as well as for the defense, which we all know the Oilers need to have plenty of firepower. But you do lose Hyman, and he is a key focal point of that offense. But for the Oilers, they had the tie game after Edmonton opened up the scoring with Leon Draisaitl. Then the Stars tied the game on a goal by Jason Robertson, I believe power play goal. And Robertson has been invisible in this series. And I'll get to another guy who's been just flat out no-show in a second. But then Corey Perry, the venerable one, gets the power play goal there in the second period. And as play continues, they get to the third period, and then late in the third, they tack on 2 empty netters. They win 4-1, and the Oilers, they look like they're primed and ready to get to a cup final and maybe win. And I say that even with what's going on down there in Florida, going for back-to-back, another conference championship. Think about this if you're a hockey fan, and especially if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan. After losing the opening 2 games in the first round to the Kings, since then, the Oilers are 11-2. They only lost a 1 game to Vegas in the conference semis and a 1 game here to Dallas. Now they have to seal the deal, you would think maybe tonight, in order for them to continue this stretch with just losing 2 games. But they have done a remarkable job here. And it doesn't matter whether it's been Calvin Pickard to save them in that first round against the Kings and obviously carried them a little bit in the Vegas series, to have Stuart Skinner come back and do what he's done here, where he's literally been a rock-solid brick wall, and the Stars have had no answers offensively to try to get a puck past Stuart Skinner, to the point where we talked about Jason Robertson. Where have you gone, Mikko Rantanen? He was a guy that was scoring goals left and right, whether it was against Winnipeg, whether it was in the opening series to start up the playoffs, and now the guy has literally been on an island by himself waiting for someone to come save him. The guy has not scored in this series at all. He's goalless in his last 7 games. And now, if Rantanen doesn't wake up tonight to get his team back in the series in their building, then Rantanen, I understand. He got the heroics there early on, saved their bacon there in the opening series against the... When they played the opening series again? Oh, Colorado. Hello, how can I forget? And then, obviously, what they did against Winnipeg. And now, it is a what have you done for me lately, Mikko Rantanen. So all I could say is that if he's going to be in a slumber that he has been over the last 2.5 weeks, as well as Jason Robertson, okay, he snapped out of it. We're getting that goal on Tuesday night. But the Stars, they are flickering at best here. Now, do I think they can push to a 7th game? Based on the way they played, I'm going to say no. Only because at least the Knicks have shown some fight. The Stars, they've done nothing. All right, they win the game the other night, 2-1. I get it, third period, and had opportunities, but they have been just a terrible surprise here. Now, if they were to lose 5-4, and mind you, they lost 6-1 early in the series, and if it wasn't for a 5-goal third period where the Oilers were undisciplined in game 1, they would have lost that game. So who knows? This series probably could have been over by now. And then Edmonton shut them out in game 2. I mean, the Stars have literally been a major disappointment in this round. So that's why I say, if you're Gary Bettman, thinking that, oh, this is going to be a long series, Dallas is going to want to get back at Edmonton, especially for last year. And here they are, gasping for air, where Edmonton right now is on the fast track to getting back to a Stanley Cup final. And this time they'll have the home ice over the Panthers. So all I can say is this, people. I understand they play the games, and we all hope for long series and competitive games, and the games have been much more competitive in the NHL than they have been in the NBA. I understand Knicks Pacers, they've been very good, as you know. But OKC, Minnesota, other than Game 4, disaster. Terrible. Florida and Carolina, all right. The Hurricanes showed some pride there, and the game was close. But then yesterday, 2-0, you're thinking, all right, oh, hey. And right, I get it. It was decided there past the midway point of the third period. But did anybody have a doubt? Maybe not necessarily just last night, but did anybody have a doubt that the Panthers were going to be in danger of losing the series? I didn't. Even if the Hurricanes would have came out alive, I think that would have been a situation where the Panthers knew, and all they got to do is go to the memory banks last year in the Stanley Cup Final when they were up 3-0, and then Edmonton came all the way back to a Game 7. I'm sure they would have said on the flight home last night, boys, we got to close shop on this team tomorrow night, which Game 6 would have been tomorrow night in Sunrise. And that would have been it. And because of their moxie and because of their experience, etc., I'm sure they would have done that. But they don't have to worry about it because they took care of business last night after being down 2-0 after the first period. And it just goes to show you the Panthers, how they're just miles apart from Carolina, despite the fact that they're mirror images of one another. And unfortunately, when you get deep into a postseason, you expect more theater, you expect more drama, you expect the intensity to heighten, especially if these series go deep. And right now, it is looking like we will be lucky and do handstands if we have one of these teams, whether it be the Knicks or the Stars, win the night. Because would you be shocked if, based on what we saw last night, that you're going to have the same result tonight? And therefore, the Stanley Cup Final, I might add, won't begin until Wednesday. So there'll be a 6-day layoff. And if it so happens that the Stars win tonight, where Edmonton will have to play Saturday, I believe they will still start the Stanley Cup there on Wednesday, as they should. But if it happens to go to Monday, then you're going to see a Game 1 in the Stanley Cup Finals Saturday, which was originally scheduled, but they moved it up to Wednesday based on these series obviously not having any length. So just keep that in mind, people, because it just goes to show you that the Stanley Cup playoffs and the NBA playoffs, although they've had their moments and a lot of big-time performances, whether offensively, defensively, etc., but boy, this is one, especially in this round, where every one of these series could end up going 5 games. And if that's the case, it goes to show you how far of a classic that this series has been. Is there anything else I need to add with the NHL? I think that's it. Maybe there's some news and notes. No, that's just about it with the NHL, NBA. So now let's move it along here. And I just have a few things to touch on because, as I mentioned as well, now that we are this close to finals in both the NBA and NHL, and with the tennis, the French Open, which I'll get to in a little bit, in the middle of the first week there out of Roland Garros, and we don't have anything else that's on the horizon. Yes, I know next month you have the U.S. Open in golf, followed by Wimbledon at the end of June into July. We know about the baseball season, which I'll segue to right now, but we're starting to get signs, a little bit of remnants by the sports gods to show us that the sports dead zone is coming. It is. It's starting to sound a little quiet here. And it'll even be more quiet if both the Pacers and Oilers win tonight. So, I tell you, it is going to be a, maybe not barren wasteland, but the wasteland's going to start to begin to where you're going to see nothing but either grass, or in this case, you're going to see nothing but sand. You're going to look around and say, we are coming to that point. But let's cut that aside. Let's get right to it. As far as baseball goes, as I get into the batter's box, not much to really discuss here over the last couple of days, although there are a couple of notes that I want to get to. And one, I have to touch on the rematch of the World Series this coming weekend out at Dodger Stadium. Yankees-Dodgers, obviously a huge series, even if it is the regular season. But for these two teams to match up again, and obviously the baseball spotlight will be on Chavez Ravine. And this isn't a thing about revenge or whether the Yankees stack up with the Dodgers, whatever, because we all know that the Yankees could go in there and sweep the Dodgers. Listen, the Angels did it 2 weeks ago, and the Angels have now lost 5 in a row. And the Yankees just finished polishing off the Angels in a 3-game sweep, I might add. So let's just add that to the equation. But even if the Yankees do go into Dodger Stadium and sweep them, or anybody going to think that the Yankees are better than the Dodgers, or anybody going to think that the Yankees come October, if they do have a Yankee-Dodger Part 2, at least in this recent window, because obviously I'm not going to go back to the 40s and 50s when the Dodgers were in Brooklyn, but this is going to be a situation where obviously as fans, we're going to look at this as the litmus test, where these two teams stack up against one another, how this will shape up, so on and so forth. And how I look at it is that the pitching matchups, especially in games 1 and 3, are going to favor the Yankees in particular because they're going to have Max Fried starting game 1, and he's going to go up against Tony Gonsolin, who had just come off the IL recently and actually pitched last week against the Mets at Citi Field. Then tomorrow, or I should say, I'm thinking it's Friday today, on Saturday, you're going to see Landon Knack, the young right-hander, and he's going to go up against Will Warren. So that could be a 7-6, 9-8 type game. That we'll have to wait and see. And then come Sunday night, you're going to have Ryan Yarbrough, the soft-tossing lefty, by way of the Tampa Bay Rays and a couple other stops along the way, go up against Yoshi Yamamoto. Let me say that again. Yoshi Yamamoto. It's alliterative, a lot of vowels there, so I had a bit of a jumbled mouth there. But the pitching matchup favors them, the Dodgers. So you would think that if it's by chalk, Yankees win game 1, Dodgers win game 3, who's going to win the middle game in that series? And of course, anything can happen. Watch Will Warren and Tony Gonsolin pitch into the 7th inning and it's 2-1. That could possibly happen, you never know. But for Yankees-Dodgers, I think it's going to be a thrilling series. Unfortunately, if you're here in New York, you're not going to watch it on Yes because it's on Apple TV tonight, Fox tomorrow, and ESPN on Sunday night, which was similar to the Met fan last week when the Dodgers were in town, and it was the same trio, Apple, Fox, and ESPN. But with the backdrop of the mountains, with the sunlight and the sunshine, I'm sure, and I'll be on top of it too, I'll follow it to see what's going to transpire as the Yankees come into the series winning 5 in a row, and the Dodgers, after losing 2 or 3 at Citi Field last weekend and winning 2 out of 3 to the Guardians, and even though they lost the last game, they gave up 5 runs in the 8th inning, which they actually had a lead, and they were on the verge of sweeping the Guardians, but they were unable to do so. But with a day off today, and with both teams squaring off against one another tomorrow, of course, that is the big series of the weekend, and I'll go through the schedule in a moment, but everybody's going to focus and zero in on Yankees-Dodgers, and why not? East Coast, West Coast, New York, LA, Yankees-Dodgers. Need I say more? So that's what you have there, and I think based on the pitching matchups, to me, that middle game, if you're going to go by chalk, whomever wins that game, and that's a toss-up, because if it's Warren Knack, I mean, anybody can win that game, but I'll say maybe the home crowd and home team, although the Yankees have played well there in the regular season. If you recall many years ago, I think in 2019, they swept the Dodgers there, and I believe Judge hit a home run in every game that series. And then 2 years ago, I think the Dodgers did end up taking 2 or 3, and for Yankee fans, not to bring up bad memories, and it was around the same time frame, early part of June, where Judge jammed his toe on the concrete bottom wall there where the bullpen gate is, and obviously was on the shelf for 6 weeks, and that torpedoed the Yankee season when they didn't make it to the postseason. So that's the last time that they were in Dodger Stadium in the regular year, but considering that they were back there last year in October, not to say it's going to be forgotten, but obviously that's long in the rearview mirror, but that's just something, who knows, maybe the Apple or Fox may bring up, considering that it's almost to the day and around that time frame. So I know that's a bad sign if you're a Yankee fan, but with that being said, I'm looking forward to the series, so we'll see how that unfolds. Now, the other big story of the week, and we talked about this a bit on Monday, and even more so last week, I should say, last Thursday's podcast, excuse me, let me clear my throat here. As a matter of fact, I may have a sip of water, if you don't mind, if you're watching or even listening, Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com. On YouTube at JAYREELZ, uncut, unedited, you know what it is. Has Juan Soto hit rock bottom? Has it come to a point that now the only signs for him to get out of this is to have probably the best panacea for all ills is the Colorado Rocky pitching staff to come into Citi Field this weekend? Now, mind you, the White Sox were just here, and the White Sox did take the 3rd game yesterday of the series where the Mets won the first 2. But ever since Juan Soto hit that double in the fourth inning Saturday night against the Dodgers to pat on to the lead. I believe, it was a 2-run double. It was 2-2 at the time. Since that double that he hit, which maybe people were thinking he's going to snap out of it, he is 0 for 16. He is now batting .224. His OPS is hovering. I believe you do the math, it's a shade over 700. We know how much he's getting paid. We know the contract. But at the same time, we're not even into the month of June just yet. And with former Met free agent acquisitions, and big time ones at that, whether your name is Carlos Beltran, and I understand via trade, but Francisco Lindor, because right after they traded him, he signed his 10-year, $341 million deal. We know the slow starts and rough first years that they had as member of the Metropolitans. And it's certainly looking like Juan Soto is going along that same path. But to have to hear Carlos Mendoza yesterday in the postgame say that, well, the night before, 3 of the 4 balls that he hit, mind you, they were all outs, but 3 of the 4 balls that he hit were just a shade below 100 miles an hour when it comes to exit velo. Am I supposed to get geeked up over that as a Met fan? Am I supposed to say, whoa, at least hit the ball hard? He can hit a rocket to the right fielder, where the right fielder doesn't even have to move an inch. But I'm supposed to be fine with that? And I understand if he's hitting the ball on the screws and if he's getting good at bats, he's going to come out of it. But last that I checked, an out is still an out. And it does not increase the batting average. Walks will increase your on base, whereas on base right now is what, 353? Which is not great, but going along the average of Major League Baseball, that's where it's at, maybe a slight touch more. But for Soto, if he doesn't snap out of it here, this is going to be a long year for him. And we talked about this last week. I'm not going to unpack the whole, is he happy being a Met? And does he wish that he was back in the Bronx batting ahead of Aaron Judge? I am not going to talk about that. If you want to hear what I had to say about it, go back to last Thursday's podcast. It's all there for you to watch, listen, etc. But the one thing I'll say, for Mendoza to come out and say that, and then to top it all off, that I'm supposed to be impressed by his at-bats on Tuesday night where he hit 3 of the 4 balls almost 100 miles an hour. But for him to say yesterday, that was a day that he didn't hit the ball hard, but he thought his foundation, his lower half, so him getting into the box, no Soto shuffle, we haven't seen the histrionics of what he's been able to do when he was a member in Washington, San Diego, even the last year with the Yankees, but because his lower half and what he saw there yesterday was in better position. What the hell is that supposed to mean? And I understand that's baseball parlance, that's baseball, even rhetoric, if you ask me, because we could talk about his stance, we could talk about his exit velo, we could talk about launch angle, we could talk about his at-bats, we could talk about all of that nonsense. But it's all about producing. It's all about production. So yes, if you hit a ball in the gap and the right fielder dove and robbed him of a hit, you tip your cap to the outfielder and that's it. We can look at that as him being close. And yes, I get if he hits the balls on the screws like I just mentioned and it's at somebody, there isn't anything you could do. But you know what? When you look at the box score and you see 0 for 4 and he's batting .224, you're thinking that he's tanking. Not on purpose, of course, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that this guy is having a god-awful year, and the returns on this investment right now, if you're Steve Cohen, he is spitting up his Sauvignon Blanc with his au gratin potatoes and his kale salad. And even though he's going to remain optimistic, just like the manager, and I don't agree with Carlos Mendoza, and I understand that he's trying to coddle his player. He's not going to kill his player. He's not going to say anything negative. I understand that. I guess that's where he takes a page from Aaron Boone, considering he was the bench coach on the Yankees for all those years. All right, fine. I don't like it. As a fan, I see right through that, and I laugh at it. Because unless he has a 2 for 4 tomorrow night and ends up leaving Citi Field to get on a flight to go to LA for 4 games next week, because the Dodgers have a New York to New York back-to-back, as you know, Yankees this weekend and the Mets for 4 next week. If he doesn't snap out of it soon, he's going to go to LA and then Colorado after that. So 6 of the next 10 games against Colorado. Not to say that the season is over if he doesn't get out of it over the next 10 games, but the question is, when will he? And then you had Ronel Blanco. I just have to throw this in with the Astros. He's done for the year, Tommy John surgery. And that's a key blow considering that the Astros don't have the pitching depth that they once had. Whether your name is Justin Verlander, obviously Garrett Cole from many years ago, but whether it's Verlander, and even though Framber Valdez is still the anchor of that staff, but you don't have guys like Jose Urquidy walking through that door. You don't have, and I get it, you do have Hunter Brown. So he's a guy that obviously is a big part of that rotation. But Ronel Blanco is a guy who almost pitched 2 no-hitters last year. He did pitch one on April Fool's and almost another one later on that year. And I believe that was after a suspension, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe he was just out for a long period of time with an injury. So that is a big blow to a national team trying to find their way in the AL West. And just to really quickly cover the standings here, the Yankees are running away with the AL East. They have a 7-game lead currently, so they look like they're going to be in cruise control throughout the summer, and of course, with a 5-game winning streak to boot. Tigers, even with the Yankees at 35-20, they do not possess the best record in the American League. That belongs to the Tigers, 37-20, and the Tigers have played well, as you know. They have now won 4 in a row. Tarek Skubal has pitched excellent, had that complete game, 13 strikeout performance there on Sunday against the Guardians, where they almost got swept at home by Cleveland, but for them, they just finished off the Giants at home for a 3-game set. Then you have Cleveland, Minnesota, and Kansas City up the rear as they have the second biggest deficit as far as division leader to second place team. And the Guardians, Twins, and Royals are all separated by 1 game. Then you have Seattle with Houston playing well here, and they've also gotten themselves on a winning streak because remember, they won 3 out of 4 over the weekend against Seattle before taking the Athletics for 2. Now they have the Rays coming into their building, and they're just a half game behind the Mariners at this point, where the Rangers, who have been floundering, and the Angels, like I mentioned, have lost 5 in a row, but they are only 6 in the loss here toward the end of May. And then in the National League, let's see if the Mets can now maybe overtake the Phillies. Now they're 3 in the loss and 2 back. And we'll take a look at the schedule in a moment. But when you have a situation where the Mets, one more time, 6 of the next 10, granted those middle 4 against the Dodgers are going to be tricky, but with the Rockies on the schedule, if they don't win 5 of 6, then there needs to be an investigation. So we'll take a look at that to see if they could gain any games in the standings. You have the Cubs and Cardinals, where the Cardinals are 3 behind the Cubs, and the Brewers have actually played well as they swept the Red Sox here in the early part of the week. But they are still 7 back and 1 game over 500 there in the NL Central. And the West, you know, is going to be topsy-turvy. Dodgers currently have a 2-game lead, but 1 in a loss over San Diego. And then you have the Giants, who, after getting swept, they're 3 back of the Dodgers. And then the Diamondbacks, who have really hit the skids. They're 2 under right now and 7 back. So Arizona looks like they're going to be fighting for a wild card. And I'll talk more about the wild card when we get to the beginning of July. I'm not going to go through wild card standings and maybe even push it till after the All-Star break. So just keep that in mind as we move it along. And that's what we have there with the baseball. But quickly with the schedule for the weekend, obviously we know about Yankees, Dodgers. And I think we have some series that are concluding today. I know Atlanta's playing Philly. Atlanta trying to find their way, as you know. But with the rain out there yesterday and Atlanta, let's see what they're doing. That's actually on now. Phillies, as I'm recording this in the afternoon, I know it's kind of late in the day for yours truly, but the Phillies are up 4-2, so they're not doing the Mets any favors as of right this moment. Top of the 8th inning, and then they have the nightcap there at 6:45. As far as the schedule for the weekend, Reds in Wrigley tomorrow. Milwaukee at Philly, good series there. Then you have, and these are series of note, Boston and Atlanta, only because they played a couple weeks ago, if you recall. St. Louis, Texas. Detroit and Kansas City, there's a series that we could circle the calendar for the weekend. Pittsburgh, San Diego, Tampa at Houston. Not a lot of good series. Minnesota, Seattle, yeah, not a lot of good series. You know, San Francisco and Miami, Athletics in Toronto, White Sox in Baltimore. Oh, that's a dreadful series. St. Louis at Texas. So, yeah, your highlight, obviously, 5-star Yankees, Dodgers. Brewers, Phillies, very good. And then Kansas City and Detroit, also very good, too. So that's what you have there with the baseball. And then a couple of things before I bid adieu. Obviously, I got to touch on the French Open, where you had another big upset. Monday, when we were on the podcast, I had
two upsets there with Emma Navarro losing the 9th seed overall, and then Taylor Fritz, the 4th seed, who both of those players were out on the women's and men's side. Since then, no harm, no foul, unless your name is Daniil Medvedev, who lost in 5 sets in a thrilling 5-setter, where Cameron Norrie was able to outlast him there in that final set. It was a tiebreaker set, but he had a 2-0, 2-love lead after the first 2 games, and then Medvedev came storming back 6-4, 6-1, and you thought, oh, now all the momentum's on Medvedev's side to see whether or not he's going to prevail here, but his comeback fell short. Cameron Norrie, like I mentioned, in the tiebreaker there, where it was 7-5, and Norrie advances. I believe he's playing today. But Medvedev, certainly a guy who has won a major before, 2021 U.S. Open. And since then, he has not been able to get back to that mountaintop to win another Grand Slam title. He's been to semifinals. He's actually been to conference finals. He's been to tournament finals, but not getting that second major that he has been pining for quite some time. So that is one player that is out. We'll see what's going to happen here over the weekend to see who will survive to get to week 2 when we reconnect there on Monday. And then you also had this other situation where one of the players on the tour, Alex DeMinaur, where he's calling for shorter seasons, I guess tennis season. Now, he did lose yesterday to Alexander Bublik, and he lost in 5 sets. Let me just double check that. Yeah, he lost in 5 sets. He was actually up 6-2 in the first 2 sets and then lost 6-4, 6-3, 6-2. So how I look at it is that, well, if you dominated in the first 2 sets, how come you couldn't finish off Bublik? So to me, that is bogus. And he could talk about shorter seasons, and I understand the tennis season just had Indian Wells and the Miami Open, and it may be a little bit condensed for him, considering that when you have all these tournaments, when they start to really gear up here in the spring leading into the summer, and then obviously after the French Open, just weeks away is Wimbledon. 2 months after that, you'll have the US Open in Flushing. And with the gap from the Australian to the French, you have all those tournaments in the middle. Well, all right, you want to say that they need more rest, or a situation where you feel like the season should be shorter, or maybe even a little bit more spread out? Well, maybe, how about when you're up 2-love in your set, or in your game, or in your set, excuse me. Let me start over here, JAYREELZ. When you're up 2-love in your match, 2 sets to love, can you somehow, some way, and it wasn't as if there were 2 tiebreakers, 6-2, 6-2, can you find a way to finish the job? That's number one. And I don't want to hear, oh, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that. It's not as if you were down 0-2, came all the way back like Medvedev, and I don't hear Medvedev complaining about shorter seasons. And DeMinaur, I've never seen him play, so hands up, raise high in the air. I don't know if that's just him griping or just him complaining or using that as an excuse when you actually had a lead going into that 3rd set. I mean, to me, that's just him complaining. And you just got to do better. And right, would you rather be working and have the schedule the way it is, or you want to pick and choose your tournaments? You want to skip the Indian Wells to rest your legs for the French? Then do that. But anyway, enough of DeMinaur, and to me, I disagree with what he has to say in regards to that. And then lastly, now, you know, as much as I love to take shots at the NFL, and I know the NFL doesn't want to hear that, they probably want to cancel me, but you know what? It's all factual. Yes, is there a little bit of personal, like ick when it comes to the NFL? There is. But you know what? I may be in the vast minority, but that minority is strong. And I'm not trying to put up a groundswell against the NFL. But to me, this is a situation where a particular sports website, and a major one at that, and what the hell, I'm going to call them out, ESPN. They have some nerve putting up a graphic 2 days ago. And this is no lie. Maybe I'll put it up on my socials. Maybe I'll even vent about it then. But they put up a graphic that said, the NFL is back. Well, almost. Countdown 100 days to the start of the opener in Philadelphia between the Cowboys and the Super Bowl, or the defending Super Bowl champion Eagles. Are you kidding, ESPN? Are you serious? Are you that thirsty for the NFL that, oh man, let's start the countdown 100 days that we could go to the start of the season? We're not even into June. We're just past Memorial Day, and here you are bringing up this stupid headline? The NFL is the furthest thing from my conscience right now. I could see if this was the opening of training camp, where if you want to have the NFL is back almost because it's training camp and you have all the storylines heading into training camp before you get to the preseason, and nobody cares about the NFL preseason. But with all that being said, you want to say that then? All right, I wouldn't like it, but I can understand because it's late July, and to think 2 months from this time, training camps will have already opened. But it's a situation where I could see, okay, you want to say it's back almost? Fine. I get it. I dig it because everybody's going to want football because we're going to be into the wilderness when it comes to the sports dead zone because baseball is going to carry us from July, August, and into September. But for ESPN, I mean, seriously, this is just atrocious on their part. And I understand it's clickbait, it's headlines for the NFL fan, and I don't want to hear people say, well, JAYREELZ, if you don't like the NFL, don't talk about it. Sorry, I've been watching the NFL since the mid-'70s. I can't divorce myself from the sport. I love sports so much. But who knows? There may come a day where I'm sick and tired of the NFL and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Which I get it will cut out half of my viewers or my listeners, subscribers, followers, etc. But obviously, I'm not going to just divorce myself from the NFL. And this isn't on the NFL, so that I have to put forth. Unless the NFL said, hey, can you put up a graphic? Which I wouldn't be surprised if Roger Goodell and company said, hey, ESPN, since our games are on your network, and because you're the worldwide leader, can you go ahead and put up that the NFL's almost back? It's 100 days, let's start the countdown. I guess I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm not going to put the blame on them and the onus on the NFL in this particular case. This is ESPN. So when I saw that, I almost threw up. Talking about the potatoes au gratin and the kale salad, if I'm Gary Bettman or any of these other commissioners spitting up their dinner or their breakfast because they're going to have short series in the conference finals where they're going to have a week off between the conference finals and the Stanley Cup NBA finals. But yeah, I almost got sick to my stomach saying that the NFL is almost back. And they're like, well, almost. Again, June is still, count them, 3 days away. We're not even to Father's Day. We're not at the end of the NBA and NHL seasons. We're not even at July 4th, the MLB All-Star break, the US Open in golf, the Wimbledon, the Super Bowl of tennis out in London, and the other tournaments that are going to take place. US Open at the end of August, college football, which will start before the NFL. We're not even anywhere close to that. But guess what? ESPN couldn't deal with it. They couldn't hold, they had to burst at the seams to let everybody know that the NFL is almost back. ESPN, your thirst and hunger for the National Football League, the impenetrable shield as I like to call it, it can't be that bad. Can it? Ugh. I hate to start the podcast that way and even conclude on that, but you know what? That's what you're going to get. You're going to get opinionated, entertaining, informative, knowledgeable, but most importantly, people, credible information from yours truly. Thank you so much for stopping by, passing by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, like I mentioned every time toward the end of these podcasts, please, I implore you people, subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review, Apple, Spotify. The website is jreels.com, the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, and of course you can watch the video podcast on Spotify. Both of those places, doesn't matter, depend on your liking. I'm sure you have Spotify playlist and music that you listen to and you want to divert and listen to my podcast on Spotify, fantastic. But if you subscribe, increase the visibility for all those out there that do not know what the JAYREELZ podcast is. I cannot stress it enough. As an independent podcaster who's doing this full time, trying to blaze a path and trail in this universe and to try to earn and make a living, which is slowly but surely happening. But again, this is where I need your help. So take a screenshot of that, send it to your family, friends, foes, frenemies, to the good sports fan, the casual sports fan, the diehard sports fan, the kook sports fan like yours truly. Please send it along to them. And even more so the channel, because the channel, I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Right now I'm at 639. The little engine that could, as an independent, again, I am wearing all the hats here. I am the podcaster. I am the host. I am the editor. I'm the writer. I'm the social media manager. I am the advertising, the marketing, I'm all of it. It's all the smoke that I want, but it's still a lot for one person. So please do your part. If you can, I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it, because coming down the pike, there's going to be a lot more. As I've said here over the last few weeks, not only do I have the 2 podcasts, as you know, Monday and Thursdays, I have the live stream every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern time. I have critique videos, which I plan to launch in the second half of 2025, in the third quarter. I also have lifestyle videos that I have on my channel that tie into the podcast, things that are uplifting, things that certainly are going to trend towards people trying to go for theirs, as I'm doing here. 15 months plus doing this as my full-time job. So rally around your boy, people. Your favorite little podcast host, your live stream host, your vlogger. I wear all the hats. So if you want to contact me, hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion. You can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. The old-fashioned way to JAYREELZpodcast@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, there's what I love to do, people. Like I said, it's been 15 months, going on 16, doing this full-time without earning a dime, which I understand. People say, well, JAYREELZ, what are you waiting for? Like I said, I'm wearing all these hats, trying to do it, and I want to do it the right way. Not the perfect way, but the right way. I could have gone different avenues and different spots, but I want to make sure. But I need your help one more time for you to get the word out, word of mouth, right? To have that support for someone like myself who puts out content almost on a daily, not almost, on a daily basis. And for you to invest in me goes more than what I could ever imagine or ever say. As much as a thank you, I appreciate you. I even love you guys and gals, you know that. Because as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and camera, I will always deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. In the blood, in the DNA, people. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.